What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little bit since I've actually done an upload on this channel, so I've got a confession to make. Back in January, we made ourselves a new purchase. So the purpose of this video is to unveil the camper we picked up this year. And what I'm wanting to hopefully accomplish in this video is for those of you that are into campers or maybe been looking at getting a camper themselves, we've had the opportunity to take this thing out on a couple trips now. But I want to go ahead and kind of go over the couple of campers that we had in mind when we were trying to make a decision as to whether this Reflection was going to be the right camper for us or not. As well as I want to kind of go through, show you guys a lot of the features that we like about this camper and what's worked for us, some things that maybe were some pain points that we're working through, just to kind of give you guys an overall view, because there's a lot of videos on YouTube of all the various campers, but what I've come to find out is a lot of those are actually videos that dealerships are doing. And while I greatly appreciate these videos and being able to do the walkthroughs when I was first trying to make the purchase, there's not really a lot of real world experience when someone that's taking that particular model that you're looking at. So with that being said, we're going to go over this Grand Design 100 series camper today. This is the 27 BH floor plan, and a lot of the comparisons that you're going to see in this video we're going to be with the Cougar 2700 BH that we are also looking at. And there was a lot of close similarities and a lot of overlapping features that each of them both had, but in our opinion there was just a handful of features that kind of helped us seal the deal and make the decision on this camper. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into this video. I'll walk you guys around the outside of this camper, and then I'll go get my better half. We'll walk in together and kind of go over the inside. That way you can kind of get a perspective as to what I like about this and what she likes on it as well. So honestly, we were looking at campers for the better part of probably 8 years before we actually pulled the trigger on this one. When my son was born back in like 2017, 2018 was when I first started getting the itch for a camper, but we decided, because he was so young, we decided to wait till both kids were just a little bit older. Then the pandemic happened, and obviously the prices all shot up through the roof, so we decided to wait through that little period of time as well. Last year we started kind of noticing the trend for camping seemed to be a little bit less popular, and I think that kind of drove the prices down to a little bit more reasonable level. Now, if you've not purchased a camper before, for us the best time we found was to find one of those RV shows, which in our state here in Indiana, they've got a really big one down in Indianapolis, and those shows usually offer some really good promo deals, and that's exactly what we did and took advantage of this year. So we went around and walked through all the different campers. I had a very specific list of floor plans I was looking for, and honestly the 27 BH that I ended up getting, as well as that 2700 BH from Cougar, were kind of my top two. And then Arcadia has also got a line that's basically the Cougar's twin. But we had pretty much decided early on, and if you look back to a video we did back in the fall last year, we actually rented a bumper pole 38-foot camper to take as a test run. And we decided after that trip, while we were so comfortable staying there and we really liked all the amenities in that camper, we absolutely did not want a bumper pole just for pulling it down the road and the sake of stability going down the road. These fifth wheels, they pull a lot better. They're a lot more stable on the road in my opinion. Not to mention having that extra 5 to 6 feet that goes over the bed essentially takes this 32-foot camper and makes it more like a 27-foot, something like that, pulling down the road, and then maneuvering into some of these campsites that are tighter. It just gives me the added advantage. That's ultimately why we decided to go with the fifth wheel model. Now, I already mentioned that this thing's about 32 foot, 3 inches in length. The height on this camper is gonna come in at 12 foot, 3 inches. So it's not gonna be the tallest thing on the road. And honestly, that's kind of a good thing, especially when you're going into some of these campgrounds and you've got the low branches and things like that you gotta deal with. You've got a little bit more clearance that you don't have to worry about. Honestly, when you start looking into the fifth wheel market, you've quickly determined that the fifth wheels come with a higher price point. Now, this was a very aggressively priced. I honestly feel like I kind of stole it when I picked it up at the show. In fact, since I've owned this for the last 6 months, I don't think I've even seen a price within $5 grand of what I paid for this anywhere posted on the website. So that's the thing too, is if you're patient enough and you wait around, you could actually find a pretty good deal on these things. But also, with that being said, with this being Reflection's 100 series, this is an entry-level fifth wheel, so a lot of the bells and whistles that you're gonna find on some of the fancier models are not going to come on this particular floor plan. But when we were comparing this to the Cougar model, there were a lot of features that this particular brand and model had on it that Cougar did not. And one of the biggest features being the auto level. That was something that, while it wasn't a deal breaker and I could have dealt with just the regular standard power jacks, I was really kind of wanting that auto level feature. And this one actually comes with the auto level on it. And since owning this and using that now probably a couple dozen times, it is extremely nice to get to the campground where you're going, unhook from the truck, hit that auto level button and just let it do its thing. And within minutes, it's off and going. Another comparison between this one and that Cougar line was the main entry door on the side of the camper. Now, this one here has got the door with just your standard Lippert front window and frame on it, whereas that Cougar Sport's got a full glass door. Our personal preference on the door was strictly, we wanted this style door because the extra heat when the sun's pounding on the side of that door, and that glass on the Cougar, I felt like it was going to kind of become more so of an oven, whereas with this door here, it has a little bit more insulating property, as well as we've added the shade to that window now, and we can kind of get that side to where it's completely shut off from the sun, whether it be in the morning or the evening, and help keep that camper a little bit cooler during the summer months. Now let's go ahead and move around to the suspension. I want to take a second to show you that real quick as well. There wasn't a huge difference when it came to the suspension between this one and the Cougar. Both of them now come standard with ABS brakes. The biggest difference I saw between this one and the Cougar model was this Reflection Series actually comes with the Goodyear Endurance tires standard and stock from the factory, whereas the Cougar is still using an imported tire. And if you've searched forums at all or done any kind of research on tires, you've probably seen some of the horror stories that exist out there around tires. So that was a big selling point to me. This also has the MoRide CRE 3000 suspension on it. I thought that was also something that was really cool that they put on this standard, just instead of trying to save $1 to keep the price point down or put a little more money in their pocket. Now here in the back of the camper, there's several differences that come between this one and that Cougar model we were looking at. So the biggest one being ours came with the ladder standard and permanently mounted to the back of the camper, whereas that Cougar model has got a ladder prep package where you could add a ladder, but it's not actually something that it comes with from the factory. Now the other key difference back here in the back is going to be that our cargo door is back here on the rear of the camper, whereas on the Cougar it was on the side. No really big deal there as far as it really just comes down to preference. The biggest difference is going to be on the inside, which we'll go over here shortly. I really like that it's got this big nice cargo area back here in the back, and I'll go ahead and open that up for you. We can take a look at that and you'll see when we open this up just how spacious this is. We've got probably 6 different camping chairs mounted here over here on the side, as well as I've got a projector screen, I've got my outdoor griddle that I'll use, and some of the kids' toys that we take in and out depending on when we're on trips or not. But I've got a lot of room to grow and there's a lot of cargo space back here that you can use. The Cougar, on the other hand, has just about the same amount of space, but it's not near as tall. It's actually doubling as a third bunk, which we'll show you that here just in a second. And that was one of the other key features that kind of sold us on this Grand Design versus that unit as well. And then not to mention, you've also got an outlet here on the sidewall, as well as this light here that has 2 different functions. So you can essentially turn it on full time, or you can set it up to motion. So when you open your bay door, that light will kick on when you need it. Both models also had a factory 3,000-pound 2-inch receiver hitch on the back as well. And that was something that I really wanted to have, especially so we could mount our bikes on the back of the camper or be able to carry any extra cargo if we ever decided we wanted to do so in the future. So being able to put those bikes on the back of this and haul all 4 bikes to the campsite whenever the campsite allows has been kind of a nice feature that we've been able to take and add on to this camper here in the rear. Now moving on over here to the driver's side of the camper, this is where the slide's going to be. Now this isn't the biggest slide out there, but it's certainly not small either. We wanted something that didn't have what you would consider one of those super slides, I guess. But the other key difference when it came to the slide box between this one and the Cougar is that this one is actually on a rack and pinion slide system versus the Cougar that's got the cable system. But if you've done any research on those at all, you've seen where those cables can slack over time, or there might be a little bit more maintenance involved with that. And the rack and pinion was kind of the way I wanted to go. Now let's go ahead and jump up here to the driver's side front portion of the camper. And you're gonna see here, we've got basically 2 access doors here. The first one here is gonna be one of your 2 30-pound propane tanks, which is also really nice. Now both this and the Cougar came with 2 30-pound tanks, so that wasn't really a big difference there at all. But it is nice that I've got both those tanks here ready to go. I've got plenty of propane to use. And then on the passenger side of the camper on the rear is a quick access port. So you could hook up your outdoor grill too and use these propane tanks. So that's pretty handy to have. The other really nice feature about this camper is the pass-through bay. Now when it came to comparing the inside bay and the wet bay portion here, this and the Cougar, this one also won out in my opinion as well. I really liked the layout of this Nautilus panel versus the wet bay and the connection settings that were part of the Cougar setup. In all honesty, it's really easy to switch these little valves back and forth. They've got a real easy layout here for your color codes. Depending on whether you're gonna be hooking up to city water or you're dry camping, or if you just need to fill, everything's right here. Plus you've also got the access to an outdoor shower, which they include the nozzle as well. So you can essentially like wash off your feet or wash mud off or something from your freshwater tank or your city connection. You've also got your black tank flush as well as your valves for your black and gray tank. Now on this camper here, it's actually got 2 different sewer connections that you need to dump from. Your gray tank is divided into 2 tanks. So essentially from your front dump valve, you're gonna be dumping your gray and your black tank from the front of the camper. The other gray tank is back by the rear of the slide, and that one's gonna be just for your kitchen. Now something else that's an advantage on this Grand Design versus the Cougar is that you're gonna have roughly 9 more gallons on your black tank in capacity on this Grand Design and like 16 more gallons on the gray tank. And I think that's due to the fact that this has got 2 gray tanks. I'm pretty sure that Cougar's only got the 1 gray tank if I remember right. After going on a couple trips with this camper now and staying for 3 to 4 nights in a couple places, we realized really quickly that those extra gallons of capacity really add up, especially when it comes to like doing dishes or taking showers. And we've actually already gone ahead and invested in one of the Camco Rhino turd toters essentially, so that we can relieve those tanks when needed. We figured that out at the last trip, that it'd be nice to have that option available versus trying to strategically use water, especially when you have a full water hookup, but you maybe don't have a sewer hookup on your campsite where you're staying. Also in this driver's side bay here on the pass-through is where your auto level is set up, is installed and ready to go. It does have a tire link setup, so if you want to add a TPS sensor, it is prepped for that. But essentially if you just hit your power button here, it's going to show you your voltage on your auto level, and it's pretty easy to use. So honestly, it remembers the hitch height when you unhook from the truck. Once you get this unhooked from the truck, it remembers that height. It's going to go through and level the camper for you essentially. When you're ready to go at the end of your trip, you hit your left and right buttons there. That's going to bring it back to your hitch height that it remembered from when you got there. And then you can just drive right underneath your unit, hook up, and you're good to go. I've really enjoyed this auto level feature on this unit so far. And then sliding back from this pass-through bay here is where you've got your water heater and your furnace. This is an on-demand water heater, which was pretty much standard and same on the Cougar as well. The one kind of gripe I have to the on-demand is it seems like it takes a little bit of time to get that hot water flowing. But honestly, I think a lot of the campers nowadays are coming with that on-demand system anyways. The days of having just a water heater, I think, are slowly becoming more not the norm than these on-demand tanks are. But you do have to be a little bit more aware of your water consumption when you're running, especially on the hot water side of things. You're gonna waste a little bit of water trying to get that water heated up. Now, something else that was kind of a big deal to me was also making sure that I was gonna be able to maneuver this thing around and have a decent turning radius on it. The disadvantage that I have is I'm running a short bed truck, so I wanted to make sure that I was gonna be able to have somewhat of a turning radius to be able to maneuver this in and out of campsites, as well as my driveway when I get back home. And both the Cougar and the Reflection have a really good nose design, and you can see where it kind of tapers back there and gives you a little bit more cab space when you're turning this thing, as well as the pin box on this unit is sticking out past the nose, or essentially it's right at the nose on this one. The Cougar does have a little bit more pin box sticking out front past the nose than this Reflection does, so it had an advantage there. Now, something else you might want to consider, especially if you've got a short bed truck, is looking into a sliding fifth wheel hitch. But depending on where you're staying and how tight of a spot you may have, that sliding fifth wheel hitch and that extra foot or so of space in the bed when you're backing up could make a huge difference for you, depending on what kind of situation you get yourself into. Now let's go ahead and move into this front cargo bin area. And in all honesty, they're pretty similar on this. Now this, as well as the Cougar, both have a solar prep package. So this one particular one is equipped with a 180 watt solar on the roof, versus that Cougar's got a 200 watt solar panel on top of it. So pretty comparable, but the Cougar does have a slightly bigger wattage on the solar panel. But you've also got a 60 amp charge controller mounted in the front of this bin here, as well as your auto level jacks that you'll see up in each corner. The biggest difference in this bin between the two campers and what we were looking at and considering is the fact that on the Cougar, they store their spare tire up here in this front bin, which takes up a lot of space. On this Reflection series, they actually mount the spare tire back in the rear of the camper underneath, kind of like a pickup would have its spare tire mounted, and then you can just wind that down to the ground and take that spare out when needed. It might be a little bit easier to get the spare tire out of this bin, but I greatly appreciate the fact that they gave me this space to put in here what I want to do with it, and then that spare's tucked somewhere away, out of the way, in space that I wouldn't normally use. But it makes a good spot for me to be able to store several tools up here, and then of course you've got the battery mounted right here as well. So basically in this unit I can run the lights in the camper, as well as I can run the fridge even without plugging in. So I've got a little bit of off-grid capability, and if I wanted to install an inverter in here later on, I could run some of the outlets as well, and I could even add batteries to this bank to have a little bit more capacity when I didn't have grid power to be able to plug into. Now before we go ahead and move into the inside, and I'll show you the inside of the camper and all the things we like and dislike about that, I did want to take a second to show you something that I thought was really cool about this particular Reflection that the Cougar did not offer. This comes equipped with Compass Connect, so the actual control panel inside of the trailer here is a lot more intuitive and a lot more fancy than what that Cougar comes with. And essentially that Compass Connect, if you've never messed with that at all, you can download an app on your phone. So I'll throw that on the screen so you can take a look at what I'm seeing. But what's really cool about that is it works off Bluetooth to your phone, and some of the cool features that allows you to do is, as long as you're within maybe 30 feet of that controller inside the unit, you can communicate through Bluetooth on it, and that's going to give you the ability to see your voltage. It's going to be able to operate your lights. You can see RV health. Shows you your black tank, your fresh tank, as well as both your gray tanks as well, to kind of give you an idea of where those tanks might sit. But the coolest thing I found on this is if I'm sitting out on the campsite and maybe I'm sitting around the fire and I want to retract or bring that awning in or out, I can essentially just hold down the button on here and hit extend. And you see, as I'm holding this button, my awning is going ahead and coming out for me. And that's a really cool feature in my opinion. Something else that's really cool as well is the fact that I can operate the slide box as well from the outside. So let me show you what that looks like as well. So obviously I've already got the slide out, but let's just say you got to your campground and maybe you were by yourself setting up for whatever reason, and you want to be able to monitor your slide box as you're setting this thing out. Now, obviously I've got mine out, so I'll go ahead and run mine in, but you could see if you had your slide in and you wanted to be outside watching like tree limbs or your power pedestal, I could go to my system here and I can go to my slides and I can hit, in my case, I'm going to hit in, and as I hit in, you'll see my slide starts going in right there. I thought that was really cool, and I've actually used that a couple times here at home. Just when the slide's been in the way and I need to get my garage or whatever, I can hold this button down, and then I can go ahead and bring this slide back out until it bottoms out. And then the slide's back out. So obviously that's not a huge deal for most people, maybe in most scenarios, but if you are by yourself and you're trying to watch this from the inside, you can see where the value of this might come in. And then on top of that, this also operates all the lights within the rig as well, both inside and out. So I can go through here, I can turn on and off my tank heater if it's during one of the colder months. I can hit my water pump and turn that off and on very easily. As well as my awning lights, I could turn those on from outside as well. And then any of the lights on the inside. There's also a built-in leveling feature as well, so when you get to your campground, you can level your camper side to side before you actually hit that auto level. And it'll give you a little bit better auto level experience when you go to hit that button. So pretty cool app. I think there's some room for improvement on this app, but honestly, it's worked pretty well for me. It's been pretty reliable, and it's come in handy for me a couple times. Now, with that being said, let me go ahead and grab the Boss real quick. We're gonna hop in the camper here where the AC is actually running, and I'll see if I can give you a little bit of an insight as to how this insight's worked for us, and you guys get a feel for that. Okay, so I got the Boss with me. We bought a camper.
We bought a camper.
So we've been at this for 6 months, like I said. So I wanted to go ahead and bring Erin in here with us because I wanted to see what her perspective was now that we've taken a couple trips. So we'll go ahead and do an interior tour real quick, but I also want to see what she liked and didn't like about the camper. Now that we've got it, obviously we went back and forth between the Reflection and we went with the Cougar, but we ultimately decided on this model here. You remember why? It's been 6 months since we did it. Do you remember why we did that?
Big thing is the look, the interior. I really struggled with the aesthetic.
The cabinets in the Cougar were like white, which wasn't a big deal. It looked really clean. It just seemed less finished, I guess, than the Grand Design. So like for instance, in this one here, the cabinetry's all got like glass doors that are tinted versus the other cabinets were just standard white. Looked like something that was kind of like a base model you pick up at a big box store. Counter space was pretty much identical, but the exception was going to be, this one has the extended countertop, so we're actually able to flip that up. The Cougar model didn't have that. So it gives you a little bit more counter space there without losing any kind of floor space at the same time. So that was kind of a big deal to us, especially because a lot of the counter space that's over here kind of becomes a catch-all when we first come in the door or whatnot. So we end up sitting keys and hats, gloves, whatever it is that we got with us that day. It kind of lands right here on this counter. So we lose that counter space there. Now, when it comes to the actual kitchen layout and everything, they're pretty much the same. They had high cabinetry, but if you're shorter like we are, I'm only 5'9", we've discovered quickly that we needed a stool in here, didn't we?
Yes.
So we definitely recommend getting a stool because the top cabinet shelves are a little bit harder to get to. And other than that, it's not a huge deal, and it kind of makes it feel a little bit more open in here as well. What other things have you come across so far that have kind of been game changers for you or that you didn't expect maybe when we bought it?
The sink is significantly deeper and wider than most, and it's easy to do the dishes, and having that extra counter space is great for like drying, so having like a drying station, because again, if we're utilizing the counter for any kind of cooking, we usually have a coffee pot or the toaster, and it takes up that space a little bit. So having that extra little bump out helps with the counter space.
Yeah, big time. The first trip we went on, it was really wet, so we ended up doing a lot of our cooking in the kitchen here versus being outside like we wanted it to be. Being able to cook on that stove and then use that countertop space when we were kind of locked in the camper while it was pouring down rain was kind of a big deal to us. The other thing about this camper too that I thought, it's comparable with the Cougar, so it really could have gone either way, was the fact if we move over to the slide actually here, so you can see we've got the dinette here, but we've also got a 10 cubic foot fridge. Now the fridge is actually a pretty decent amount of space. If you get into the bigger fifth wheel models, that's when you start getting into those bigger 12 cubic foot fridges and up. But it is just a 12 volt fridge. It does not run on propane like the old models may have had. And in all honesty, that's kind of an okay deal for me. I don't need to run that on propane. And with us having the solar set up, we can keep that fridge running at all times, even when we're not plugged in. But the key difference here between this one and the Cougar, and I think the Cougar actually edged out the Grand Design in this instance, is the fact that the fridge was recessed into the slide on the Cougar. So when you're in road mode and the slide's actually in, you could access that fridge a little bit easier with it being recessed into the slide. However, with our slide being in, and even with this fridge being shut right now, you still have 4 or 5 inches, I think it was, that you can get in there. We could run that slide out 3, 4, 5, 6 inches to get enough space if we're on the road to be able to access that fridge a little easier. Wasn't a deal breaker for us. The other thing though is if you are like 6 foot or over and your head would hit this, if the fridge was recessed into the slide and you're trying to access that fridge, there is chances where you would probably hit your head on the woodwork for that instance. So that's something to keep in mind. It didn't bother us either way, but that Cougar probably does edge out and win overall in terms of the placement of that fridge on there. Otherwise, this slide's been pretty spacious, I think. Even when we were locked in here on that first weekend, playing more card games and whatnot, the dinette set here is pretty comfortable to sit at. We played, I don't even know, a couple different games with the kids for a few hours that one night. And it's pretty comfortable to sit there. And then eating dinner, we've got plenty of space. But then again, our kids are 8 and 10 years old, so they don't take up a lot of space yet. So if you got teenagers or even more adults, that dinette may become a little more cramped, which is where you might want to actually utilize the little sofa that's here on the side of me as well.
It was nice having the space to be able to cook and then not feel like I was being bumped into just not having that space to cook. So that was great. The stove itself was wonderful to cook with. Heated up very quickly and then very easy to clean. So that was one thing that I really liked. First time cooking on a fire burner stove.
Yeah, so this one runs on propane. We use a electric cooktop here in our house. So, and that's what we've had since we moved in day one at this place. So having more, I guess, the conventional, just your propane burners was something that took a little getting used to. And in fact, I remember I think I was at the camp store and you couldn't remember how to start it. So I had to walk you through that.
Yes.
But, but after you figured it out, it's actually a pretty easy stove to use, operate. And then as she mentioned, it's super easy to clean as well. So that kind of covers the kitchen, I think. I think storage wise, there's tons of space in these drawers and everything. So we've got plenty of room to grow in this camper for the most part. And even with us, like right here behind us, you can see we've got even more cabinetry back here as well. And this is where we're storing like our towels for the shower, as well as like if we're going to the beach or going to a pool, something like that. And then all the kids' board games and everything we leave in here on a full-time basis. So this has got, like I said, a ton of space that we can kind of use and grow into as we evolve and kind of keep acquiring things along the way. Let's go take a look at this bunkhouse, because that's actually another thing that's also extremely different from this versus that Cougar lineup that we looked at. So the bunk space here, this one is just a double bunk, which is going to be pretty typical on most of your fifth wheels. However, on that Cougar, it was kind of enticing because it had a third bunk option. So essentially, that rear cargo area that I showed you outside to be able to store your stuff, that Cougar still has that, but it doubles as a third bunk if you want it to be. And so it comes with that mattress basically on the floor. Now, whereas it'd been nice to have that extra bunk space if we're going to bring some of the kids' friends with us on a camping trip, something like that, we do feel like this was a little bit better setup for us. And the main reason being, we liked this step that's down here on this that you can step up into. It gives the kids a little bit more access, being that they're not very tall yet. And then it feels a little bit more finished, I guess, in my opinion, with this cabinetry, the way it's set up. And the biggest kicker on that Cougar versus this one, and where I give the Grand Design the edge, is the fact that their actual fuse panel and main distribution panel was mounted right back here. So when your slide shut, if you've got a fuse issue in your camper, you can't get to that unless you can get your slide out. On the Grand Design, it's actually mounted right by the front door, behind the sofa, very easy to get to. So in my opinion, this Grand Design definitely won out when it came to the bunk features and the space that it has available to it. The one downfall that we've had so far in this Grand Design, it's not a huge deal. I think it's just something we got to work through, is the fact that the air duct on this unit is up in the top bunk. Whichever kid actually gets the top bunk when we're going, and they tend to switch back and forth, they seem to be the more comfortable kid between the two bunks, because none of the airflow from the top bunk makes it down to the bottom bunk here. Now the heat runs from the floor. I think the role is going to be reversed when you get to the fall months and we're running the heat instead of the air. That duct down here being closer to this bed is probably going to be a little nicer. But then again, with heat rising to the roof, I may be wrong and that top bunk may stay pretty equal. We'll have to wait and see until when the fall comes as to whether that's actually true or not. So that's really the only gripe that I've got when it comes to the bunkhouse. And then I'll show you as we go through the camper here as well, that both the bunk and the bathroom all have a nice pocket door. And on the Cougar, not all the doors are pocket. And in fact, on the bathroom on the Cougar, I believe, this door was actually slid to the interior wall. So it's ate up a little bit of the space. It became unusable space. I couldn't hang hooks or anything like that on that wall if I wanted to do so. I really like the fact that the Reflection took the time to put in pocket doors and build that into this floor plan. Working our way to the front, before we get to the bathroom, thought I'd take a second to talk about this Compass Connect that we recently talked about outside. So it's got the built-in Bluetooth app that we can use so I can run the lights and the awnings and the slide all from my phone. But this is the panel that's on the inside. And versus the Cougar, I think this is actually a little bit more superior setup. Now, there is something to be said about the Cougars and the fact that they've got more physical switches, and those switches are something that you could pick up relatively easy. So if that's something you're looking for is simplicity, then the Cougar might be the better model for you. However, we do like this Compass Connect system. I really like how the layout, it's very easy to see the LED lights when it comes to my tank capacities and where those are at. And something that's really nice about that as well is when they get on the black and gray tank side, when they get up to 2/3, those lights will change from green to orange. And then on your fresh tank, when it goes from full down to 1/3, it changes to orange. So it's kind of a visual indicator. Maybe one of my tanks needs to be addressed and I could take care of that really quick. Now, the water pump is easily turned on from this panel, and there's also the switch down in the nozzles panel as well. So depending on whether you're outside the rig or inside, you can turn that water pump off or on based on what you need. You don't have to come in here and turn that off and on every time. So that's kind of a nice thing as well. And then mounted right below it is going to be your AC control for your furnace. This has the Furrion chill system in it. I think it's a 15,000 BTU setup. And it's done a pretty good, decent job as far as cooling the unit so far. We've had one trip where it reached the 90s, and I would say it stayed pretty comfortable in here, wouldn't you? Yeah. So the biggest thing that we found when it comes to running the furnace or the air at night is when the air conditioner kicks off in the middle of the night, we want that continuous airflow in the camper. So if we've got this set to, let's just say 66, we're running it cold that night, and it shuts off still, you lose the airflow pretty quick. It kind of feels like stagnant air. We're used to having a ceiling fan running in our bedroom in the house. Since then, we've went ahead and transitioned over to running that fan full time on high at night instead of running it on auto. So even when the air conditioner and the compressor is not kicked on and running cold air through, at least we've got continuous airflow running through the camper, and that's made a huge difference and making us feel a little bit more comfortable in the evening when we're sleeping. So the bathroom's not overly large for this unit. Obviously, when you get into some of the longer units and the more fancy ones, they have a little bit more space to offer. But honestly, this bathroom doesn't suck either. The shower itself, and even with me being shorter, you can see I've got plenty of headspace here. So one thing I liked in comparison to the Cougar on this one was the fact that they did not opt to put a skylight into this one. The Cougar has a skylight. For me, that was kind of a pain point. I didn't want another spot where basically a potential roof leak could happen. So they just opted to go with a light up here that runs on the other light for the bathroom, and I can turn this light off and on based on what I want the level of brightness to be in here. But if you're 6'3", you're gonna have plenty of space in this shower. I've showered in this thing a couple times now, and it's pretty comfortable for the most part. And then they've also went ahead and decided to go with these trifold doors on this one as well, which I think some of the other models don't have. I think this is more of an upgrade compared to some of the showers you'll see in some of the more entry-level showers. And then the sink over here as well, not huge or overly large. The one downfall to this sink I don't think I like is the fact that it's got this flat bottom. Would you agree?
It does angle down, so the water does filter into the sink, but yeah,
it takes a little getting used to versus like your standard bowl where the bowl kind of slopes down to it. So it's a little harder to drain, but it does have somewhat of a slope to it. And then your water heater is going to be right here on the wall as well. That's going to turn on your on-demand system there, and then you can adjust your temperature based on your liking. And I think, as I mentioned outside, obviously it takes a little while for that hot water to hit whatever faucet it is you're trying to use. You have to be aware of your fresh water capacity and how much you're using on that. The other feature I think gets the edge in this Grand Design is this toilet versus that Cougar. This one's got a slight slant to it, so I feel a little bit more comfortable sitting here than I would have done in the Cougar, which is sitting more straight on. And then not to mention, like I said, this pocket door is built into the frame of the wall versus the Cougar had the door that slid on the inside. So I lost the ability to put the command hooks here on the wall like I've done. On the Cougar, I would not have been able to do that. And then with that door being right here, you lose an extra, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches or so of the space that's in the bathroom when you put that door in. Something else we really liked about this unit was this, instead of it just being a mirror mounted to the wall, you actually have some enclosed space here to be able to put pill bottles, soap, shampoo, whatever it is you want to store inside of this unit. And then this has a nice strong magnet on it, so it does stay closed going down the road and everything kind of stays in its place. It's got just enough of a lip here that it kind of holds things in, so when you open the door back up, nothing's falling out at you. And last but not least on this floor plan is going to be the master bedroom. So this is at the nose of the camper, obviously the part that sits over the truck. Honestly, it's not too bad in here. It is a little bit on the cramped side, I'd say. Now, obviously, if you're going to get into a little bit nicer unit, something that's a little bit larger, that's where a lot of the gains are going to be made. It's going to be right up here in this bedroom. But honestly, if you look to the side here, where you go around the foot of the bed here, you can see how tight it is, and she typically sleeps on this side of the bed. Wardrobe's really nice. You got a lot of space to store stuff inside of that. When you open those doors up, you do have a light that pops on for you, and you can see there's a decent amount of room in there. We actually store our hamper in there as well, and that's where we put all of our dirty clothes, so we've got plenty of space in here for the trips that we take. But when you're getting dressed in the morning, trying to get dressed in the evening, it is a little bit more difficult to kind of get in here, get maneuvered around, and get your pants on without falling on the floor. One of the first things that we actually made an upgrade on was the bed. Now, most of these campers come from the factory with like a 4-inch mattress, and we discovered very quickly when we took that one out last year, that bumper pull that had that factory mattress, that was absolutely miserable with the bed. Sleep. No, it was terrible. So I think we ended up using like comforters to try to build it up to make it a little bit better, if I remember right.
I actually slept on the couch.
You moved, that's right. The second night you went to the couch, you left me.
I couldn't sleep on it.
Yeah, so we opted to go ahead and go with a Sealy mattress, which we just bought from like a mattress store here locally. And sleeping on this thing from day one, the trips we've taken so far, it's been night and day. It takes a little adjustment. You're just sleeping in a weird spot. But honestly, if you're going to do any upgrades at all right there at the beginning, I think the mattress is something I would definitely try to put in your budget and keep at the top of your list. Comparing this one to the Cougar, in terms of the way the bedroom looked, they honestly had a lot of similarities, but I think what it came down to was that this had the little lights there on each side of the bed. I don't think the Cougar did, but the cabinetry and everything in here just looked a lot more finished than the reflection does. The reflection's just got more of a homely feel to it. The cabinetry just feels a lot better built in my opinion, versus like down here where I got these access doors here where it kind of hides the stuff. Those are just open spaces in the Cougar. Not a huge deal, but just everything in here just feels like it flows better. It was easier to get in and out of the bed in my opinion than the Cougar was. Just little things like that go a long way and kind of helping make a difference as to which of the campers I wanted to choose in the end. So that's kind of the stuff that we've learned so far since we've had this camper and taken it on a couple trips now. We've owned it for about 6 months. We've kind of been in and out of it here in the driveway, to be honest. One of the first things we did when we got the camper was I went ahead and installed a 50 amp outlet off the side of my shop, just so I could plug this thing in and we could actually kind of enjoy it here in the driveway, get a feel for how it runs. We actually spent the night in it once in the driveway just to get a feel for it. And while we've been trying to outfit it and buy everything we need. So that's something else. If you have the means to do so, having an outlet here on your property or wherever it is you stay, if you have the option to keep your camper on site where you live, that's pretty handy to have as well. Other than that, I just kind of want to take you through our thought process. We spent a long time kind of going back and forth as to what we were going to get, looked at bumper poles for a long time, ultimately decided I think the fifth wheel is the better option. And after having the fifth wheel now, I think we did the right thing when it comes to that. It pulls a lot nicer than that bumper pole did last year, if you would agree. It was a little scary pulling that thing last year. So, and even with me having a Class A CDL, and I'm pretty used to towing trailers, that 38 foot kind of had me white knuckling, at least at the beginning of the trip, because it was something I just wasn't used to. But this one here on the first trip, I was pretty well set and got pretty used to this thing. It's pretty easy for me to pull down the road, to be honest. Hopefully that kind of gave you some insights as to maybe if you're comparing a couple different models that might be right for you, kind of the thought process we went through. This video is something I was really wanting to see, I guess, going through just to see what people were considering important for them when they were looking for their camper. And I wish there would have been a video like this that I could have found or come across that kind of compared two models, just so I could kind of wrap my head around what features were more important than others. But other than that, if you've been following us for a little bit, our channel is going to include a little bit more camping content now. We're still going to stay true with our farming and a lot of the DIY projects that we do, but we're going to start including this in as part of the segments that we do on our channel. But if you're anything like us and enjoy camping, or if you're just on the fence, maybe looking for a camper yourself, we'd love to have you guys subscribe to the channel and kind of follow our journey along with us. Other than that, I think that's where we'll leave you on this one. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this one today. We'll catch you guys in the next video.